I'm City Manager Jim Drumm, and we're here today with the City of Brunswick in depth. On today's program, we're going to talk about the decreasing crime statistics that we have in the City of Brunswick. And we're going to talk about GIS and what that stands for and the programs that we have shared with the county and the city and our other partners. So I'm going to begin actually by introducing our Chief of Police, Kevin Jones.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Welcome. Good to see you. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about our crime statistics. We've seen it actually in the last few years. We've seen it start to come down. And I know a lot of citizens and people in our community are interested in that. And I think sometimes we always get a bad rap that we have high crime in the city. And so we've seen some changes. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, sir. We have our totals for 2018, and our crime was down 1.2% over the totals of 2017.
Okay.
The good news is, over the last 4 years combined, we're down 33% in the City of Brunswick on our Part 1 crimes.
And that's fantastic. We've watched the crimes steadily come down. In fact, it was kind of a drastic change a few years ago.
Absolutely. We were up to 41% down. I think it was 3 years ago. Yes, sir.
Okay. And it's kind of broken into different kinds of crimes. Is that right?
It is. Part 1s are the more severe crimes. We look at homicide, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglaries, larceny, vehicle theft, and arson. So that's the main ones, and then there are other smaller ones that are paired under that also.
Are there, did they all come down, or particularly certain types of crimes?
Violent crime actually came down in the city. That's the good part. There was a rise in the property crimes, but as far as the ones I mentioned, the homicide, rape, robbery, the decreases in 2018 over 17, homicides were down 50%,
right.
Rape was down 60%, robbery was down 2%, simple assaults down 7%, and burglary was down 32%. So there were some increases, like you mentioned. There are different areas. Aggravated assaults were up 13%, larceny 12%, vehicle theft 34%, and arson 150%. But don't get freaked out about the arson.
Right.
As its average, the average of that is a change from 3 arsons in 17 to 5.
And that makes sense.
Small numbers.
I was going to ask you even about it sounds wonderful about the statistic on homicides, but being a small community, we have very few of those crimes. And so you could have a year with 0 and then a year with 1, and you have a 100% increase.
Absolutely. In 17, there were 4 homicides in the City of Brunswick. In 2018, there were 2.
Okay.
So that
showed
makes a
the
larger
decrease.
Percentage, down 50%.
Okay, so as we're looking at the statistics, we're seeing a very positive overall. I mean, sometimes we see a little shifting up and down, but if you were to go back 3 or 4 years, I think we're seeing that trend overall come down. And I think there are people that sometimes are concerned or afraid that we have a high crime rate. And I think any community has crime, but I mean, we're seeing a positive change in Brunswick. Over the last, you said 41% was our overall, but have you seen really a decrease in all the categories over the 4 or 5 years?
Yes, sir. I mean, it fluctuates a little bit, but let me tell you some of those numbers, like you mentioned, that creates a big percentage. Like we mentioned, there were 2 homicides in 2018. Rapes, there were 4. Robberies, there were 43. Burglaries, there were 180. Arsons, there were 5. Vehicle thefts, 59. So the numbers are really low considering the population and also the number of folks that we have in the daytime basis versus the actual resident population. It more than doubles during the daytime working hours within the City of Brunswick.
That's interesting. But that's also the population increases, so there's more people here.
Sure, absolutely. But you have to also look at the number of folks that travel through Brunswick, that come on and off of St. Simon's Island, the number of folks that work in the City of Brunswick, the number of folks that come and shop in the City of Brunswick, and also tourists.
True. So all that extra population adds to the statistics. And though some of the numbers sound a little scary, I mean, if you were to compare us to other communities, these crimes exist in those communities as well. It's just the public doesn't always get to hear the statistical reports year to year.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, it's not like there's not crime elsewhere in unincorporated Brunswick or Glynn County or even St. Simon's Island.
Absolutely.
I know recently I saw a map of we've done some mapping in some of our crime analysis, and it showed, and I think a lot of people look at the core of Brunswick somewhere, maybe to the north end, where there tends to be some pockets or hot pockets of crime. I think that's common in any community. It's not like the whole city is riddled with crime, or any community is that way. There's some hot areas that perhaps there are more crimes than others.
Absolutely, and that changes. Burglaries, a lot of times we'll have one or two criminals that target a certain area. And when they target that certain area, what we call in the city of Brunswick a zone, they may live close by. They may be within walking distance, or they may be where new construction is, and they will target those areas. During Christmas time, we always have a rise in the north end of the city where more of the businesses are, the Target Plaza Shopping Center, the grocery stores, the Walmart. We'll have a rise in thefts, shopliftings, even like folks snatching a lady's purse is what you always hear about, or entering autos. Because there's a bigger concentration around Christmas time in those areas, so crime will rise in those areas at that time.
And I know each year you always look at that. Your statistics are looking pretty good, and you're always a little concerned what might happen in that last month of the year because of that. Whether it's a break-in at one of the plazas or a Target or something like that, we sometimes see those things occur during the holidays.
Absolutely, and also burglaries usually rise during December, and thefts. Folks buy their Christmas presents, put them in their home. Well, the bad guys, the thieves, they say, hey, I can go get some free Christmas presents. They know that most families buy Christmas presents, have them in the house under the trees wrapped up. So they wait until the residents are gone, and they will go break in the house and steal your Christmas presents. And by the way, do you know what time most burglaries occur?
No.
As far as daytime, nighttime? 10 a.m.
That's interesting.
Why do you think that is?
Probably because most people are out at work, especially during the week.
Most people are at work during the week, absolutely right.
Yeah. That's interesting. And that's not a phenomenon that's just to Brunswick. I mean, that occurs across the country. People have kind of statistically looked at that, knowing that's a good time to get in, and especially the Christmas holidays.
Absolutely. And one thing you mentioned is when we have hot spots in the city, particularly burglaries, entering autos, the police will focus on those areas. We do get the crime statistics. We have a crime analyst. So she prints a map for us showing those crimes, the times of day that they happen, even days of the week, any correlation that we can put together to get a pattern. And we will focus our officers and our attention on those areas. And we've been very good, particularly since we've had the crime analyst in these maps, in catching these folks and stopping that activity.
Well, I think it's a good use of technology. I mean, we have a lot of other technology in law enforcement, but really using the mapping is a good way to chart our problems and to focus on them, and I think it's a great tool that we have.
Absolutely. Now, there's two things that we've done that's helped our crime come down in the city over the last 4 years in particular, sort of a two-pronged process.
Okay.
Number one is we have partners with the FBI, our GBNet, Glynn County Brunswick Narcotics Enforcement Team. That's combined city and county investigators. We target gangs. We target gang members. We target gang leaders. Once we do those roundups, we see crime take a nosedive in the city. Second part of that is community policing. We have our officers getting out of their cars, doing neighborhood checks, home checks, business checks, nighttime, daytime, and how that affects or has a difference, makes a difference, is the officers get to know the people in their zones. People get to know the officers. A lot of times folks don't want to get involved if they may, a little lady sitting on the porch and she sees somebody go around the back of a house. Police get there, I don't know anything, didn't see anything, they don't want to get involved. Well, if they know Officer Friendly, if they've met Officer Friendly before because last week he got out of his car and come and talked to her while she's in her garden pulling weeds or working in the yard, she's a lot more likely to talk to the officer and give him that information. So that two-pronged process and approach has worked, and that's what has helped us get our crime down 33% in the last 4 years. That shows in our numbers. Let me tell you one thing I'm proud of.
Okay.
Is we also categorize our calls for service in number of calls in the city. In the last several years, our top calls for service are neighborhood patrols. That is 31% of our 31% of our total calls for service is we get out of our cars, we talk to the folks, we see what's going on in the neighborhoods. That means officers checking the houses at nighttime, extra watches, checking the business, shaking doors at night. That's what helps reduce crime, and it has made a drastic impact. I'm happy to say that that is our number one calls for service. Some other things that have happened in the city is also our number of calls for service has went up dramatically. 17% in 2018 over 2017. And that's a pretty good increase, but that means that our community service, community-oriented policing is working. That means that folks are calling us saying, hey, this is going on, this is happening, I want you to know about this, help us make our city better. Also, our arrests have went up in 2018 by 30% over 2017, and our property recovered in burglaries, entering autos, stolen properties went up 13% in 2018. So very proud of those statistics. Our officers do an outstanding job. Our leadership focuses the officers in the areas that they need to be, helps them to look at what we need to do to reduce crime and put these bad guys in jail.
Well, I think that's great news. I know not that long ago people said, what are we doing different in Brunswick with law enforcement? We're seeing crime come down. And my answer has been, from talking with you about seeing what we've been doing in the police department, is it's not that we're necessarily arresting more people, we're arresting the right ones. We've actually used all the technology that we have, our community policing, our partnerships, and we've targeted where the problems are, and we've arrested the right people because, and like you said, when you make those key arrests, all of a sudden we see a dramatic drop in crime for 30, 40, 60 days. Potentially until maybe they get back out on the streets, depending what the courts do.
Absolutely, and we're also using our federal partners to make federal charges on these bad guys, particularly in drug trafficking, firearms trafficking, anything that we can put federal charges on. They stay longer, spend longer time in jail, and the charges are usually more serious as the federal charges. It keeps them in jail and off our streets longer.
Well, and a moment ago I mentioned about the mapping, and I think one of the statistics I was surprised at from from looking at that is at the north end of Brunswick, where we border on Arco, we were looking at the comparison of crimes, and it wasn't meant to be a comparison. We were looking at a general area of the crimes and the calls that we saw. We actually saw a higher, significantly higher number of crimes across the county line in unincorporated Glynn County than we did in Brunswick, the city, and that was a surprise. And maybe the county has a larger jurisdiction, or we have a heavy amount of patrols. I'm not certain, but what would you attribute that to?
One thing in particular is Neighborhood Watch that we started up in that area, and the citizens getting involved and giving us that information. And the Norwich Commons that has been up there the last few years, that just has had a positive impact on that area. That place is well run, kept very clean, and they do backgrounds on the people that move in there, so they know who is coming into that area, and they do a very good job of policing that area on their own.
Okay, so some of the redevelopment that's happened and maybe focusing our policing efforts there. I know that we team up with the county also as well, and we do a lot of work in that area. I was just seeing that sometimes when it comes out that says there's another crime in Brunswick, maybe it's not necessarily Brunswick, the city limits.
Right. A lot of times the media will say Brunswick, the person that was arrested, the suspect is from Brunswick. A lot of times they actually live in the county. That's sort of the common term. Brunswick means Glynn County to most folks.
Well, and true, and a large amount of the county on the mainland has a Brunswick mailing address, so the postal district doesn't necessarily equal your city limits, and so that's sometimes how you're identified as the Brunswick man, 47, arrested for whatever the crime might be.
Right, but he may actually live in Glynn County, not the city of Brunswick.
Right, and I think a lot of people don't see that, so I think sometimes, again, that comes back to give us perhaps a bad rap.
Another thing good that in the city that's happened over the last year in 2018 is our traffic accidents. We have a lot of traffic, like I mentioned a minute ago, tourists, people visiting, people that work in the city go across the causeway to and back. And we have a lot of accidents, a lot of DUIs sometimes in the city. So we've increased our citations by 61% in 2018 over 2017. Also, our traffic crashes, as we focused on that, are down 8% in 2018. And our DUI arrests, something that's very important, was up 13%. So we added another traffic officer to our traffic unit, and it has showed the results. We also do road safety checkpoints, usually late at night in the city. We try to do one of those at least every couple months. And that's what we look for, is DUIs. We look for folks that don't have insurance, driving on a suspended license, and those have been very effective with those results.
Well, even though the statistics have shown that the the DUIs have gone up, I don't necessarily mean that's an increase in people driving under the influence. This means that we're catching them. I think they probably were always out there.
Right, it means we have the manpower to focus on that more, so we are finding those and getting them off the street and keeping our streets safer.
So if we have people out there driving, they need to know that the City of Brunswick's on patrol and we're going to be watching for them.
Absolutely.
Very good. Part of our statistics, and I think we're getting, we've looked at it the last few years and we've seen it, we've had some local recognition. I know the paper wrote a story and you've made some presentations to some community groups, but I think we're starting to get a little bit more of a greater recognition. Recently we saw a press release and a national organization designate us as a comeback city. Can you tell us a little bit about how that worked?
Yes, sir. That was the securitychoice.com, and they usually do that every year, put out the crime stats for the cities, look at who's up, who's down throughout the United States. And what they report or use off, get their information off of is the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting Database. And so what they did is they compared from 2006 through 2016 and rated basically the top 50 cities, actually the top 100, but they focused on the top 50. To see whose crime actually came down. So over those 10 years, the city's crime came down 34.29%. And that's basically an average with what we had is 33% over the last 4 years. They just looked at a wider range.
Okay.
And so that is based on the decreased crime rate, FBI statistics. So that's parallel, right in line with what we're seeing here. So that tells us that it adds up.
It does, and it makes a difference. I know that, and I looked at the report, and it kind of puts us in a category with a number of cities. I want to think it was maybe Jacksonville, Florida, Macon, I believe was another city that was in the top 100. Athens, they've seen a drop in crime as well. Sarasota, Florida. So there's a number that jump out there that are not that far from here.
City's a safe place to be. Want residents and tourists to come here.
Absolutely, I think so. I live here and I enjoy it. I live downtown and I enjoy it. It's a great community, and so it's. I think a lot of people have a misperception about what it is to live and work downtown, but I think it's a whole lot safer than definitely it used to be, and I think it was probably not as bad as people made it out even then.
Sure. So anyone that would like to look at those crime stats a little closer, they are listed on the city's website and the Brunswick Police Department's website also. You'll have the complete report.
Well, great. Thank you very much, Chief. I appreciate the information today.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great afternoon. Today, what I'd like to do is introduce the GIS manager for Glynn County, Bob Nyers. Welcome.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
Okay. Well, I know my program primarily covers city programs, but the county and the city have a lot of partnerships from time to time, whether it's 911 or in this case GIS, and so we do have a lot of things that we join together and work on.
Right. GIS, we share common ground. GIS does the mapping for the entire county, including the islands and, of course, the city of Brunswick.
So what does GIS stand for?
GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems.
Okay, I think a lot of people know GIS and they know it has something to do with mapping and computers, but I don't think they really sometimes don't really know what that is. I think in government sometimes we're guilty of using a lot of acronyms and letters for everything. And so that's kind of interesting. It's probably been a long time since people actually spell out what the GIS is. It's so common now to use the letters.
Yeah, they understand what it is, but they don't know what it stands for. And we do a lot of work with. Well, we do some work with the city. We share an ELA, an enterprise license agreement with with the city and with the Joint Water and Sewer Commission. We all have the same database. Our data is available to the city as well. All of our data. So any maps. And I work with Darrow from time to time, the city engineer and your public works department.
And a lot of different agencies. Obviously the county departments, I guess our constitutional officers like the tax commissioner and then some of the other property appraiser's office and some of those groups as well, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, now I guess I should go back up a little bit. How many years have you been involved in GIS? I know before computers, maps were done a little bit differently. I don't know if, I know I have a couple classic ones on the walls back here, and maybe those were early computer plotted maps, but
That's a pretty map, though.
Is that, I remember in my early days starting out that some of the maps were actually hand drawn, and they were, or even when they were very basic maps on computers, they were done much differently. And I know technology's come a long way in a short time.
Yeah, and it's expanding. It's expanding exponentially. It's constantly growing. New things. We have a lot of different information out there that we weren't able to share previously, like ArcGIS Online, interactive maps, and such like that. These interactive maps, I don't know if any of you have been to, if you've been to our website.
Absolutely.
But we have the GIS website, and we have a lot of information there. We actually have a way of, if you go to our website, and you can look up your flood zones. If you had, just by putting in your address, it will zoom you into your flood zone. You'll be able to take a look where your house sits, where it, and what zone it's in, which is a big asset to the community.
Absolutely. And I know that like the flood zone layers or addresses, and you work with 911, and I guess all the addresses that go into the 911 system. I guess I've heard you manage a lot of data sets. How complicated is that, and how many are there?
We've got over 100 data sets. We use a lot of them. Mostly the data sets that we work with continuously are the addressing of roads, parcels, and districts such as voters districts, commission districts, school districts. Those are constantly updated. We have data sets that we update every once in a while or when they need to be. Commission districts, for example, voters districts, those don't change very frequently. Roads and addresses are constantly changing. We have a project that we're working on. It's called parcel rectification. Some people go to our website and they look at the aerial photography and look at the parcel lines, and they don't just kind of line up exactly perfectly. So what we've done, we initiated this about 8-9 years ago now, and what we do is we send a person out in the field. We got a field tech that goes out in the field. He collects the field data. He uses GPS. When I say collects data, they're geo-referencing it with the GPS system, and then we import that data into our mapping software. And when we do it that way, the information is very accurate. Actually, we've got several different ways of GPSing assets out in the county. For example, like roads or addresses, they don't need that much precision, like the road center line or an address. So we use survey grade or map grade equipment, which gets us accuracy sub-meter to about maybe 2 foot accuracy. Doesn't need to be that precise. We also have survey grade equipment, which is centimeter accuracy. When I say centimeter accuracy, I'm talking centimeter accuracy both vertically and horizontally. So we can get very accurate with a lot of things. And that's important when we're doing property corners, when we're geo-referencing property corners out in the field, and we bring that in. Because the closer we have to their actual position, the better our data is going to be. We have, part of that project is we have a person in our office who does research, plat research.
Okay.
And it's like a big 500 square mile puzzle that we're putting together, and it's like putting a square peg in a round hole.
So when you say plat research, are you like referring to the old plats of the old subdivisions that may have been platted in 1920 and trying to bring it into new technology and put it into computers? Yeah.
Yeah, and we're dealing with different technologies. Obviously, right now we're using satellites to position things. In the old days, they didn't have the high tech that we have now. So, like I said,
right.
the accuracy that they had back, we go back to like into the 1800s.
Right. So some of those documents may not have been. I mean, they were as accurate as they could have done at the time, but maybe not.
Right. Exactly. So we have basically two different types of accuracy: map grade and survey grade.
Okay. I guess one question that would come to mind is, I mentioned 911 earlier, and that's an important function of the county and for the city as well. We jointly have the center together. What is the other uses that you use? And maybe you talk a little bit about what you do for 911. Does that allow a police officer to be able to GPS or document where they're headed, or a
Crime
fire
statistics.
truck? And
Right,
okay.
right.
Not just the statistics, but do you have mapping? I don't know if there's mapping that would map out a fire, say a fire engine on its way to a fire or anything like that. Do we have
It's
anything
called
like that?
AVL. The technology is available. We don't have that just
At this point?
yet.
Okay. So maybe that's our next challenge, one of our next challenges. But
Automatic vehicle locators.
Okay.
We do have it in the fire. Okay, our fire trucks do have it. I don't believe the police cars have that.
okay,
just
so
yet.
fire might have it because they're primarily looking for structures that are fixed in locations. But other uses that you have.
Other uses.
Who uses your data?
Our data is used by our property appraisal office and tax assessors. We deal with just about every department in the county, and we deal with local governments,
City of Brunswick.
agencies, like I said, with the City of Brunswick and Joint Water and Sewer Commission. At the state level, we deal with Department of Transportation, Department of Transportation, the DNR, Department of
Okay.
Natural Resources. Federal level, we are dealing with everybody from, or we have interaction with everybody from the National Weather Service, the National Hurricane Center. These are, especially during hurricane season, we work very tightly with them. We work with, in the county, we work with the EMA director, the city police. During emergency situations. We went through a couple hurricanes in the last
We sure did.
couple of years. Hurricane Matthew and Irma. We're all familiar with that, and we were a big part of that.
So I assume some of our mapping has elevations, so maybe in the marsh or where we might expect to see flooding, if I won't say tides, but surge comes in based on a storm, we might have a good prediction of what areas might be impacted?
Yes, we do. We are there before, during, and after the event. Before the event, we are getting questions from the city and questions from the county as to where should they position their assets? Where is the high ground? Where do we expect the flooding to occur? And we have that information. We also work with the last couple of years we've been getting, starting with Matthew, we started using information that we received from the National Weather Service and the Hurricane Center. And these are called geotiffs. And they are actually specific to the actual event, not just where the high-low ground is, but where the National Weather Service and the Hurricane Center anticipates flooding based upon the intensity of the storm and how it's coming at us. They send us these geotiffs, and then we can predict where the flooding might occur. So we can make maps of that, and assets, trucks, heavy equipment can be put in those places, and hopefully not get flooded. Actually, our GIS staff, we did a survey after Hurricane Matthew. We went out and we surveyed high water marks. These high water marks were then put on a map and compared to what the National Hurricane Center had predicted, and they were just about dead on with those predictions. And actually, we had them in town when we were doing that, and we got high praise from the National Hurricane Center for doing that. And they were very impressed with the fact that they had predicted so well.
Right.
Because at that time it was a new product.
Okay. It's a valuable product, like you said. I mean, I think that we all are familiar with flooding and storms that may occur, but when you have something as large as a hurricane, it's going to flood areas that you don't normally see. And so at that point, we don't know where the water may run, and it does sometimes do that. You hit a certain elevation, and it might run 3 blocks because it never normally hits that level. So I think that again, this use of technology makes a great difference in our planning and our response. You said that we can do something to hopefully stop it from flooding. I think sometimes it's just blocking the roads to make sure people don't travel on them too, because sometimes you can't stop the hurricane.
And we do have, like I mentioned earlier, we have a lot of information out on our website. We do have maps out there such as evacuation and reentry maps that you can print out, or you can stop by our office and pick up that information. We do have that available.
You mentioned joint water sewer, and I know that especially in Brunswick downtown, we have a lot of projects that involve 100-year-old streets. So we have, so sometimes there's still a mystery of what's under the road, but I know that one of the great things about GIS that I've seen through the years is the overlays. And you can put on water, and then you can put on sewer, or you can put on storm drainage, and I think that we have those abilities with GIS technology. But back in the day of the printed map, you had to look at the sewer map, and then you'd pull out the water map, and you'd find the intersect. You were comparing maps in different locations because they weren't necessarily always on an overlay. So you did your best at looking maybe sometimes at 3 or 4 maps.
Right, and then those, what you're talking about is layers.
Right.
Okay, you can turn, in our mapping software, you can turn the layers off and on. So you can have the street, or you can have a background map of our actual aerial photography. You can have other background maps also. But what you're talking about is layers. You can turn on the water, you can turn on the sewer. And we work with the Joint Water and Sewer Commission. When I first started, it was the city sewer and water and
Right.
the county sewer and water. That was merged about 8 or 10 years ago, and
Yes.
we started the Joint Water and Sewer Commission. The Joint Water and Sewer Commission now, they collect and maintain their own data. We do maintain it in the respect that we house the data in our database. Like I mentioned, we are, they are one of the entities along with the city that's in our enterprise license agreement. So we all work together and we all have that same software.
So I mean, I know that information is available obviously to the city, but I guess it could be available to contractors that might be working in those areas or those projects. And
We get a lot of contractors in, developers. Some of our biggest people that visit us the most are usually like regular citizens, people that live in the city and the county, developers, business people. They're all looking for, again, property lines. They're looking for information on elevations. FEMA's has a big part of this, where you can build and all that. We recently did a project, community rating system, and basically our flood insurance is based upon those programs and those projects that we did for FEMA. And we just completed it. It's been accepted, but we don't know what the results are yet. So hopefully we'll get a good rating and maybe possibly even get a break on our flood insurance. That's a possibility.
I know that has been a big project in the last, probably the last couple of years, is the FEMA maps and the flood zones, and a lot of changes have been made in mapping in Glynn County through the FEMA maps in the last couple of years.
Well, originally the FEMA maps were based upon best available data and aerial photography, and they would calculate the elevations based upon that information. Since then, we've done what's called LiDAR. LiDAR is very similar to they bounce lasers from an airplane off or a helicopter off the ground, and they calculate the elevation of the ground and the contours of the ground, the ups and downs and all that. And that is what our new flood maps are based upon. And they came out just about this time last year, the new flood maps. And I think most people got a pleasant surprise. They were in a better flood zone than they were. I know myself.
I agree.
In the city, I went from an AE 11 to an X zone, which is technically out of the flood zone. I still have flood insurance because I don't live too far from the ocean, intercoastal.
That's good. I actually had a good result as well, so I was happy to see the flood maps change. I think a lot of people in the city were. Very few, I think, were impacted the other way. So
I hadn't heard of any.
yeah, I can only think of maybe 2 in the whole city. So that I've heard from. So I'm very. I think the accuracy though is the difference.
Yeah.
Is in the past a lot of our observations, like you said, and now this is very accurate, and so I think it tells again more accurate story. All right. Let's talk. I met with the chief of police earlier, and we talked a little bit about crime in the city and crime stats. And I know that you also work with the crime mapping, and not just for working with the Brunswick police, but also for the Glynn County police. And so you've got some sort of mapping that shows where the hot spots might be for crime. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a heat map. Part 1 crimes, and we can create a heat map very similar to what the chief was talking about, based upon where the most incidences of the crime have occurred. Now you're looking at the county's crime heat map. This map shows Part 1 crimes, and these are the more serious crimes. The reason we call it a heat map is because the brighter, more intense, hotter colors represent where the crime is actually occurring. The yellower and less, the cooler colors show that crime's occurring there, but not as frequently.
That's a very interesting fact about the heat map and how law enforcement uses that to really focus their resources to fight crime in Glynn County, and that's impressive. I think, again, another use of technology to help. I think another expansion in technology, and it's kind of recent, is the use of drones in your department. Is that right?
That's exactly right. We have 2 certified FAA remote pilots on staff at GIS. I'd like to introduce you to Andrew Strickland. He's one of our
welcome, Andrew.
pilots.
So you're part of like the Glynn County Air Force or something like that, right?
Sort of something like that.
Well, great. Tell us about the drone program. How long have we had it?
So essentially, we've been had a drone program for a little over 2 years.
Okay.
We have to get recertified every 2 years, and so next month we'll get recertified. We'll go to a flight school and we'll take our test again. This is FAA test.
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of like a real pilot's test, but we don't take a physical test. It's just a written test.
Okay.
Other than that, we have the drone we use is a DJI Phantom 4 Pro. We use it. It has a 4K camera on it. It shoots really high definition photos and videos. The FAA limits us to 400 feet above ground level, so we can only fly 400 feet above the ground. And we use it for lots of different things. We've used it for to look for missing persons, for wanted persons. We've used it for planning purposes. We've used it for transparency type stuff. We use it for SPLOS projects. Right now we're engaged in SPLOS projects where we are taking photos and videos of SPLOS projects before, during, and after the projects. We're using it for BATS projects, which is essentially DOT state projects. So we insert that media into applications where you can see where the projects are, and then it has a photo or video of actually what's going on with the project. So we've used the drones for all kinds of stuff like that. They think up more ways for us to use them all the time, actually.
Well, I think using it on a project is a great way to study the project, or even, like you said, to show the progress. But I hadn't thought about looking for missing people, and that can be valuable.
Right. Well, that's a lot of what we do with the drone doesn't have anything to do with GIS, but we were the first ones in the county to have a drone.
Okay.
Since then, our EMA department and our community development department have gotten their own drones, and these guys Our guys are teaching them the ropes on how to use them, etc. So it's been a very positive program, and we're pretty proud of it. We were the first ones to get a COA, probably in the area, and that's a certificate of authorization to fly the drone from the FAA.
We were kind of in the works over the summer talking to the fire department and the lifeguards on St. Simon's to potentially one day help with beach rescue or beach reconnaissance and stuff like that. So we hope to expand it. There's just an infinite number of models and uses that they make out there. We're only using one manufacturer and one type. And so
Right.
we hope to expand in the future. You can put anything you can think of on drones. Probably the future for us and probably EMA is infrared, what they call FLIR, forward-looking infrared cameras, so you can see hotspots, persons in the woods. You can see people at night, living things at night. So that's probably the future of where it's going.
I mean, I could just imagine somebody out on a boat in the marsh or a kayak, and the tide changes so swiftly here that they get caught in the mud because the tide went out, and now we're trying to figure out what happened to that person. It could be a search with a drone that would be a whole lot easier than trying to put boats and people into the marsh in those areas as well. I don't know if we've done that or...
Right, we have, what we actually had was a person who was trying to evade the police.
Oh, well, that's...
Went into the marsh, and GIS and EMA worked together with their drones to find that person who was hiding in the marsh.
Excellent. Okay. So I mean, so if you can find someone in the marsh, whatever the reason, we have a way to contact them and locate them.
Right. A real misconception I think about drones and UAS technology is that the FAA requires us to keep line of sight with the drone, and so it's a requirement of theirs that while we're flying the drone, that someone make contact, visual line of sight with them, with the drone. So that's a real misconception. I think that's one of our limitations right now is that you have to maintain line of sight with it, and so that's what it limits us on some projects.
So then that might be something that we move forward down the road to move up the next step.
Yeah, well, actually, we have been in touch with Argero, your city engineer, has been in touch with us, and I think they're looking investigating having your own drone here for the city.
I've heard that too, so that might be interesting. We might have a lot of traffic flying over Glynn County with all these drones.
So when we talk about drone certification, an important thing to remember is that a hobbyist, someone who goes online and buys a drone and flies it for their own personal enjoyment, does not need a Part 107 certificate. They don't need an aircraft certificate to fly their drone. Someone who's using a drone or a UAS for commercial purposes or to make money with, or they're using it for local government like we do, we're required to have the Part 107 license. And so that is something that we renew every 2 years as required by the FAA.
So if people see some strange birds out on the shore, we'll know what they may not be birds. They may actually be in Glynn County out flying. So Bob, now people learned a lot about GIS, but there might be some questions. They might want to learn more. So how do they find out more about what you do?
If you'd like to get in touch with us at Glynn County GIS, we are located at the Pate Building across the street from the old courthouse downtown on Reynolds Street. Or you can go to our website at www.glenncounty.org and click on the GIS maps, and that'll take you right to where we're at.
Well, great. Thank you very much. That's a lot of good information that we hopefully give out to the public today and to learn about GIS. So thanks for coming.
Pleasure doing it. Thank you.
Thanks. We learned today from the Chief of Police that Brunswick really is a safe place, and it's getting safer every day. Our crime statistics are showing that we have a significant decrease in crime. We've also learned today about GIS and what it stands for and what it does, and how this new technology is changing how government and business make differences in our community. So I'm glad you all joined us today. Come back next month for a new program.
There are a lot of great events happening in downtown Brunswick this February, starting with the Green Scene Film Festival. Green Scene of Coastal Georgia is excited to announce the 2019 Green Scene Film Festival at the historic Ritz Theater, February 2nd from 2 to 5 p.m. Join us for this year's feature film presentation of Sonic C. Cinema Gourmet, Thursday, February the 14th. A great evening for Valentine's Day, 6:30 p.m. at the Ritz Theater. This month's film is Tokyo Story, one of cinema's masterpieces. The film, which follows an aging couple's journey to visit their grown children in bustling post-war Tokyo, surveys the rich and complex world of family life in a profound and heartbreaking way. Food provided by Indigo Coastal Shanty. Play readers, Tuesday, February the 26th, 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. at Jumbo Studio South. More than your average book club, discover what makes a great play great. In February, we'll be discussing Top Dog, Underdog, Susan Laurie Park's Pulitzer Prize-winning two-person play. This play has it all: sibling rivalry, racial tensions, con games, and much more. To RSVP, call 912-262-6934. Showstoppers, February 9th, 10th, 16th, 17th, 23rd, and 24th at Brunswick Actors Theater, a musical variety show presenting songs and performances by local talent that are show-stopping. Includes song and dance numbers that will have you up and dancing in the aisle. Call 912-262-0628 for reservations. The Southeast Georgia Health System Bridge Run, Saturday, February the 16th, starting at 8 a.m. at the Sidney Lanier Bridge. The Bridge Run, a signature event for the health system and the Golden Isles. Visit thebridgerun.org for more information. The Big Read, events all month long at the Ritz Theater. Celebrate reading with this year's Big Read featuring Celeste Ng's award-winning novel, Everything I Never Told You. Various events at the Ritz starting February the 1st. Visit goldenislearts.org for the schedule. And to close out the month, First Friday on March 1st, 5 to 8 p.m. in historic downtown Brunswick. See old friends and meet new ones at this monthly community event downtown. Shop at one of our downtown merchants, check out the latest at the Ritz Theater, grab a bite and quench your thirst at one of our downtown restaurants while listening to some live music.